saw your mother's diamonds. Did you recollect the pain? That she doesn't care, that you were forgotten son. If I showed you that the oceans were just a drop of rain, would it lead you back to the day you lost the war? I don't mean to bring you down before tomorrow, but I need to lead you there before we've lost the sun. I don't mean to bring you down too hard tomorrow, but I need to take you there before we've lost our world.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Stench of Truth radio show here on InceptionRadioNetwork.com. And I'm on every Friday from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And I talk to people related to the paranormal field as well as the conspiratorial fields, or parapolitics, as some prefer to call it. And tonight we're going to be continuing in the vein of secret and hidden history, where we will be looking at, once again, one of the most interesting groups of the 20th century, and that would be the Nazis, and their development of alternative physics technologies, as well as alternative technology in general, stuff that is still secret, some of which has made its way into either the United States or what was formerly the Soviet Union, and today presumably would be some other countries that have come out of that breakup. But also, interestingly enough, a third force that we have heard some talk about before in previous shows that is still active in some fashion today. And my guest to discuss all of this stuff is Henry Stevens, and Henry is an author. He has written 3 books on Hitler's, Nazis, and their flying saucer technology, their alternative physics technology, and their hidden and secret and suppressed technology. The 3 books are Hitler's Flying Saucers, A Guide to German Flying Discs of the Second World War. The second one is Hitler's Suppressed and Still Secret Weapons, Science, and Technology. And the latest book that he has is called Dark Star. And the subtitle of that is The Hidden History of German Secret Bases, Flying Discs, and U-Boats. So welcome to the show, Henry. We're really glad to have you.
Well, I'm really glad to be here, and it's a pleasure to be here, Ted.
Yes. Well, I have to tell you that I saw you recently on the History Channel, which is affectionately referred to by some as the Hitler Channel, talking about advanced technology and UFOs. And I thought that the information that you presented in the show that I watched was very interesting. So I'm very glad that I have a chance to have you on the show today to talk about this issue, because in reality, I believe that the vast majority of what has happened from the end of World War II to today has an incredible amount of significance to the material that you research and that you have written books about. So maybe you could give us a little thumbnail sketch of how you got started investigating this material in the first place, and how you started to put some of these pieces together.
Well, okay. As a child, I was interested in flying saucers, and I'm 64, so that goes back a ways. And in 1974, I read an article by Renato Vesco, just a short article in Argosy magazine, and it was saying that basically UFOs, flying saucers, don't come from outer space. They were built by the Germans during the Second World War. I know, this is Vesco speaking, because I was an engineer in Italy working with the Italians. And so UFOs are an outgrowth of that. And I kind of put that away, and I couldn't see any more to that. I mean, I didn't have access to Vesco's book at that time, but later, about 1985, I got access to Vesco's book, and he just lays it all out, and that's pretty much it. I learned to read German in college, and I was pretty good at science, and so I thought, well, if there's anything to this, I should be able to to get into it. And then along came Harbison's novel, where he actually cites some old newspaper references in German from the 1950s. So I sent a graduate student. I advertised in a college newspaper. Sent a graduate student to Germany. He was going back to Germany for the summer. He brought me these articles and a whole lot more. And I was off to the races. I just figured, well, maybe other people would want to know about this. So I translated these articles, and I sold them in a little, mail order business, and used that money to continue the research, and it just got, I made contacts, and so, here I am today, 25, 30 years later.
Well, it certainly is a subject that can keep you busy for a long time, because there's a lot of material that's available for research. I think there's still this general lack of knowledge amongst people when it comes to history in general, but also when it comes to World War II in particular. I think a lot of people just write the whole business off, like when the war was over, that was it. Germany was done. The Nazis were finished. Everything sort of just rolled up, and we got some of the scientists. The Soviet Union got some of the scientists and some of their research, and basically we just divided the spoils. End of story and discussion. But that's not exactly the truth, is it?
Well, no, that's not the truth at all. The victorious Allies told us about the Messerschmitt 263. They told us about the rocket planes. They told us about the V1 and the V2, and that's basically all they wanted to talk about. Everything else was kind of, they didn't want to talk about that. And the historians, the post-war historians, the people that are a generation older than I am, were so used to believing everything the government said. They were just so used to the press releases from the government that they reported it, and then they spent the rest of their lives reading over each other's shoulders, going over the same material without ever digging. Honestly, Renato Vesco is the first guy that ever did any digging. And these people are people. I don't want to name these people, because I honestly, I see these people on the History Channel sometimes. These were my heroes at when I was in 1970. Let's say these were the people that I thought were these were just these are real historians. These are establishment historians.
Yes.
And in fact, they were just reading over each other's shoulders, and it has been that way right up until the fall of the Berlin Wall. And after the Germans became free, they decided that, hey, well, we're going to investigate some of these old rumors and get to the bottom of some of these things. And so we had the old 1950s articles, and then we had the new 1990s stuff coming in, and we had all these people in Germany that became interested, and they had these underground facilities under their feet that had never been explored. And sometimes they could get in. Likewise in Poland, Czechoslovakia, the Slavic people, they had access to these things. They went in there and explored them, did as much research as they could, and slowly over this period of time, we've had this sort of upwelling from the bottom up, bypassing the establishment historians completely. So we have information not only about flying discs and advanced technology. We have information about the real German atomic projects. There were 6 of them. There weren't 3 of them. There were 6 of them. The SS ran 3. So as you spoke of the History Channel, what I said on the History Channel was a lot of what we've been told about the Second World War is wrong. I'd go further than that. Most of what we've been told about the Second World War is wrong. There's a lot that needs to be done. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. Everything needs a second look. Everything about the Second World War needs a second look.
Yeah, and it's astonishing when you put it into the context of time and realize that we're talking about something that happened over 50 years ago. And there's still a vast amount of material that is unreleased to the public, and a lot of it is still classified as secret. I remember in a few attempts that I made to retrieve information from the government regarding certain activities of the technical teams that went into Germany, into some of these underground bases and manufacturing facilities, that a lot of the technical reports that were submitted are still classified as top secret, or were whenever I attempted to gain access to them, which is rather amazing when you think about it.
Well, what you have to do, you hit upon the Freedom of Information, and the Freedom of Information Act is the most widely violated law in the United States. And the government just does what they want to do, and they don't live up to the law. Actually, the best are the Army, Navy, and Air Force. They actually tried. They give it a good faith try. It's like, I'm under orders, and my orders are to release this information, so I'll try to do it. The worst are the spy agencies, the CIA, the FBI, and the U.S. National Archives, and I include them in there because they're a spy agency. Well, their function in life is to take documents that were sent to them and lose them so that we can't have access to them. They have no filing system. They have nothing. They don't have a card index system. They don't have anything, and they do that on purpose, and that's so that they can issue a no record when you request information sent to them. I'll just give you a brief example.
Go ahead, please.
Bill Line, a researcher who does this research also. He's a little older than I am, so he was, like the Korean War generation, and he was in the service shortly after the Second World War, maybe the time of the Korean War, and he was shown, for some reason, a film taken over Germany by B-52 crew members of a couple of these saucers attacking the bomber squadron and just flying rings around it. They couldn't shoot these things down. These were shooting down bombers, and the Americans were just amazed and terrified. So they took pictures of them. Bill saw the pictures, and the pictures went back to the Air Force. Well, a German researcher and I began requesting this film because we know the film exists. So we started bombing the Pentagon with requests, and sure enough, it was either the Army or the Air Force. I think it was the Air Force. Said, "Oh yeah, we're gonna direct you to this sergeant who is in charge of film like this, and he's actually seen this film, and he's kind of a World War II buff, so we can obtain this film for you." And I said, "Well, I was elated. I thought, this is great." So in further digging and getting over to this sergeant, the sergeant said, "Well, I sent that film over to the U.S. National Archives." And I thought, oh man, that's a kiss of death. We'll never see it now. And I said, "Well, do you have some sort of receipt number? Because this is what you need. You need some sort of a tracking number or receipt number, or the U.S. National Archives needs to acknowledge they have it." And he says, No, I don't have any of that, but you can just write them and they'll give it to you." And so I wrote to the U.S. National Archives, and of course, I got nothing. I got stonewalled and stonewalled and stonewalled. And finally, the U.S. National Archives, after going back to, I was actually writing the Pentagon for the Air Force. I had a colonel, a female colonel, who was interested in this. So she writes, now gives me some little code as to what this film, where this film can be found. Something that led the U.S. National Archives to this spot. And lo and behold, they said, we'll produce the film. But we don't produce film. You have to pay somebody to come in and copy the film. There are copying companies that will do this for you. So, I started in with this is over months and months and months of time. I started in with a copying company, and they agreed to do it, and I had to pay a fee, and they went in and they copied of this film what the National Archives would release. It was a film, as I recall, it was over an hour. It was almost 2 hours. The film came back to me. It was a VHS film type of thing, and it was the first 7 minutes of the film. It would show basically an airplane taking off and flying over some trees. So I got back to the National Archives. I said, well, wait a minute, what happened to the other, 97 minutes of the film? And they said, well, that's it. I said, no, this is 7 minutes. This is not 97 minutes. And they say, well, look, Jack, that's all you're going to get. That's it. And that was the end of the story. So I've got a file about 2 inches thick. Of course, well, I actually sent that to my partner in Germany. But if there's a lawyer out there that wants to sue the National Archives, that's what you have to do. When it gets to this stage, when they just refuse to produce, you have to sue them. So this is federal district court, and all the ramifications there. But federal district court is in any city, so as far as I know, they can be sued in any city where there's a federal district court. But that's what it'll take to get this film. But this film exists.
Well, that's rather fascinating. Of course, having some kind of documentation like that in the form of a film would be incredible, and one could certainly understand the mindset of the people in the government who are determined to keep any of this stuff secret.
Well, the mindset of the government is to keep. This is what's hard for people to understand. It's not that we're going to have a full disclosure tomorrow. We're not on the verge of a full disclosure. The government honestly believes, that everything should be kept secret, and that there's only value in releasing information if there's value to them to release that information. So if there's a propaganda value or there is some sort of other value to the government to release information, they will. But the default position is everything is secret. I mean, everything is secret. That's how WikiLeaks came into being. I mean, everything is so secret that anything you produce is a violation of the law. And so, WikiLeaks had a niche for itself if they could get some information, and they have. So,
right.
The misunderstanding is that the government is working day and night to declassify information from World War I, because that's where they're back to World War I at the National Archives. You mentioned some of the groups that went in to visit secret facilities, like ALSOS, for instance. They went in to look at atomic projects that the Germans were doing, anything to do with atomic energy. Well, the key to getting that information is to get an index of what the government has. So the first thing you want to do before arousing any suspicion, and if you request a lot of things, you arouse suspicion, you become a known entity, and you get even less. So you have to go in and you have to request an index of ALSOS files or an index of paperclip scientists or something that you have to get the master file first. That's what I've learned in dealing with the government. So yes, I have an ALSOS index. And for instance, Joseph Farrell mentions in his books about the bill, Walter Gerlach, and they have ALSOS has maybe 25 files on Walter Gerlach, but they're only talking about half of them. So there's like a number 1, and then there's a number 3 Gerlach, and there's a number 7 Gerlach, and a number 19 Gerlach, and I'll send you all those. But it's the numbers in between. Try requesting those. They pretend they can't find them. They pretend they don't exist.
I'm used to it, believe me, Henry. I've been in the business of trying to prize information out of agencies for years, and I'm very familiar with the kind of brush off that you get. So it shouldn't be any surprise. And what you illustrate is a very good point, and that's the fact that if the government had their way, they wouldn't release anything about anything. They would just go about their business, and you would be kept in the dark totally about what's going on. But you did mention disclosure, and what I wanted to ask you was, because that term is most often used when it comes to alien interaction or the possible existence of alien life. and its interaction with humans. Is there a correlation between aliens and or alien technology and anything that the Germans were doing in World War II, or after, for that matter?
Well, that's that's a subject of a lot of debate. There's a school of thought. Norbert Jürgen Rathofer and Ralph Edel claim that it was also inspired by aliens, Aldebaran, from the Aldebaran system. And they go on and on and on and on and on about this, but there's no proof. And then there's the ancient alien type of thing that they were saying that a crashed saucer, an alien saucer crashed in either Poland or in the Black Forest, and that's where the technology came from. Well, I was involved in that Ancient Aliens episode, and these are very nice people, and these are people that are fairly knowledgeable in a way, and they had a German producer. And I talked to the German producer, and he asked me an awful lot of questions, and I should have realized this man knows a little bit more than he's letting on. He asked me about that crash saucer theory, and I said, I told him the truth. I said that appeared in a British in the British UFO magazine, and it was an ad for a book. The book never lived up to the hype. There is no crashed saucer evidence for either Poland or the Black Forest. There's just none. There's nothing. Absolutely nothing. I went down the list of people that could have written about this and didn't. And I told him that specifically. I said, that is a hoax. That is nothing. Well, at the end of Ancient Aliens, lo and behold, there's a book produced, laid out there, and pictures are taken of it. The book is by a man named Jan van Helsing. That's a pseudonym for an Austrian writer who's a friend of Norbert Jürgen Rathofer. And this book is a book of conspiracies. Now, this book is banned in Germany. It's banned in Germany because it's a book of conspiracy theory, a book of conspiratorial institutions, and so they talk about the Templars, and they talk about the Ku Klux Klan, and they talk about where they got in trouble was they talk about the Zionists, and they talk about the Zionists just like they talk about the Klan. So that was unacceptable, so they got banned in Germany. Well, that book isn't available to Germans by and large. So this book all of a sudden appears at the end of Ancient Aliens, claiming it's got something in it that it doesn't have. I've got the book downstairs. I've read this book 5 times. There is no mention of crashed alien saucers in that book. That book, the writer of that book is a subscriber to a completely different alien theory, but not that theory. So I hate to say it, but Ancient Aliens pulled a fast one.
Well, that's too bad.
It is.
I did hear a lot of praise about that show. Taken from your perspective and the research that you've done into this field, do you believe that instead what we're dealing with is entirely human technology here, and it's just a matter of that the Germans happen to be thinking outside the box, to use a rather trite expression?
Well, yeah. I mean, the Germans had their backs up against the wall. They had great scientists. They were backed up against the wall, and they were told to perform. And you have to perform to save the country. And we've seen this with the South Africans in apartheid. They did something analogous. They came up with great science when their backs were up against the wall. The Germans did the same. I tell people about aliens. I've never seen an alien. I've never seen an alien blueprints of an alien spaceship. I've never met an alien test pilot. But I've met Germans. I've seen German saucer designs. I can name a German test pilot who made a statement. As a matter of fact, it's the documents in my first book. That he test flew a German saucer for somewhere between 350 and 500 kilometers. So we have people, we have German engineers that say, I built them. Hey, it's me. I built them. There's Mika Schreiber Habermold. They claim they worked on the conventional projects. Each one had a project, and 2 of the 3 claim that their saucers flew. So to get a flying saucer in the air, any type of flying saucer, a field propulsion saucer, conventional saucer. Personally, I don't need aliens.
Right. Well, I think it's important to bring up the subject because it's so often thrown into the mix of what we're dealing with whenever we talk about this, and the subject of Nazi technology invariably has entangled within it the idea of some kind of alien technology being used, and I think it's probably for a number of factors, but probably the most prominent one is a disinformation tactic on the part of people in a position to know what's going on to try and dissuade people from serious research into this issue. Because oftentimes if you conflate things with an alien thesis, a lot of times it will turn off serious researchers and they'll say that you're talking about fringe material that nobody wants to look at. And we put it back down onto Earth, so to speak, and realize that what we're dealing with here is just people who were extremely clever and ability to look at things in different ways and even, embrace different ideas of physics and ways of viewing science in a completely different light. It opens up the entire possibility that not only were the Germans and the Nazis so highly evolved and technically sophisticated during World War II and in the aftermath, but also it then really makes you wonder about what might be available to the people who are working behind the scenes today when it comes to technology and whether that be advanced flying devices or energy production or any number of other things that are so far advanced than what we see in our everyday life. And that would make you call into question a lot of the things that you're being told every day in history, in the media, in everything. So.
Well, certainly that's true. I mean, let's look at it this way. Everything that we have now, almost everything, was invented during World War II. They're jet planes, computers. I mean, the Germans invented the digital computer. They invented the magnetic tape. They invented the first programmable computer. They programmed V-2 rockets using computers. Everything we have can trace its origin to World War II or was significantly improved during those times to something that we recognize in our modern world. Now, I've asked the question, find me the exception. And, I was on a radio program, and the guy says, the host says, well, I have an exception. I said, well, what is it? He says, Watson correct DNA, the structure of DNA. And that is an exception. But that's about the only exception I know. Everything else is just an elaboration of what existed in 1945. So, if you think about the leaps that were made between 1939 and 1945, and 1945 and today, just think of what we must have that we don't know about. Just think what our government science must have in some secret hideaway somewhere that we just don't have. We don't have any idea that it could exist. And that's another thing about aliens and UFOs. I mean, when somebody says, "Oh, I saw a UFO," and the way it behaved, it must be an alien craft because we don't have anything like that. I mean, how would they know? I mean, there's no yardstick to measure. You're measuring it by a 1945 yardstick.
Right. And of course, just because it makes right-angle turns at high speed doesn't negate the fact that there could be human pilots in there using some form of dampening field that would protect them from the inertia. And also there's the idea of drone craft as well, which don't even need to have a human inside of them. So there's a whole area of technology there which it could easily be a UFO if you see it in the sky, and it's certainly something that behaves unlike what you're used to seeing, but that doesn't in any way equate to a a ship that's built by aliens that come from another planet. That doesn't mean that they might not exist. Some of these things might in fact be such, but there's really no way to know. And when you use Occam's razor, of course, the simplest answer is often the best, and that is that if they're here on Earth, they're from Earth.
Well, look, I mean, if the universe goes on forever, there's no doubt that there are aliens out there. Mm-hmm. But that's not the question. The question is, are they here? And there's no real evidence that they're here. That's what we lack evidence for. Mathematically, I mean, there has got to be alien life out there in the universe somewhere. But they're not here. I mean, if they were here, the evidence is lacking. I mean, the evidence is not. There is no evidence that they're here. So, I mean, we're back to producing UFO phenomena with the technology that we have, and we can do that. So again, just because you see a UFO, that's not proof that aliens are here either.
Indeed, it's not. Again, I think it's important to make the distinction and for people to realize that the kind of advanced technology that may be available to humans, entirely made by human beings, may be so far advanced from what you're conventionally likely to see when it comes to even the supposed experimental aircraft that occasionally come out of the Air Force and NASA. That there's absolutely no way for you to make a judgment call on that. So just because you see something in the sky that's unidentified, it's not very good logic to automatically jump to it being an alien craft of some kind. I think it's much more likely that what you're seeing is some form of secret technology that is being run by somebody here on Earth. So let's leave the UFO /alien angle behind us for the moment. If we get back to that, perhaps we'll touch on it again. But now, one thing I wanted to ask you about, Henry, is the actual flying discs that Germany developed during the war that you talk about in Hitler's Flying Saucers. And as you pointed out earlier, you actually talked to a pilot who piloted one of these craft. Now, I have always thought that the continuous wing aircraft, like a flying disc would be, was deliberately set up by Canada and the United States with the Avro car to be a failure, so that they could say, look, we tried to make a flying disc and it just doesn't work. You don't have enough power to run it, and it can't get off the ground and all this kind of stuff. And I think it was done on purpose to make people realize that so-called people couldn't develop this technology. Therefore, flying saucers couldn't be man-made, or that they couldn't fly at all. What's your take on that?
Well, if we're talking about the Avro car was the last in a long line of designs by Aviaero in Canada. They had some designs and they did some work on very large, very high-powered circular aircraft that were designed to fly very fast. The problem is what they were building really wasn't stable. There's no mechanism of stabilization for any of their designs, and I frankly don't know why they were even interested in a circular wing for those designs for that reason. But they got caught up in this post-war, wanting to imitate the Germans. Is basically what they were doing. They wanted a flying disc, and they didn't care. They didn't seem to care that their design wasn't gonna do that very well. So they the rumor is they relied on Dr. Ricker Mita, but and brought him as a consultant. But I've looked at all the Avro papers, all the declassified, and it's about a foot thick. And I've looked at each document, I've looked at each page, I've looked at each visitor's name that went to their facilities. I've looked at each consultant's name, and Dr. Mita is not there. A man, William Moore, who is famous for the MJ-12 fiasco, was claiming that Dr. Mita was involved with Avro and actually produced a document with his name on it. Well, unfortunately, that document is not reproducible. You can't get that document in the declassified material that the government will send you. So, and William Moore turned out to be a government agent. He turned out to be a double agent, and so I kind of have to throw that out. So I'm not sure John Frost ever talked to Dr. Mita. I don't know what they were doing up there. The way this goes is that they had a better design and they went with it, and then there was a better design still, and they went with that better design. So the Avro car, the best thing you could say about it, it was a floppy little hovercraft. But if you wanted to build a hovercraft, the Germans were building hovercraft. The post-war Germans were building. One of the Joseph Andreas Epp, who was a consultant on 3 of the conventional projects, built a hovercraft after the war. And his famous comment about the hovercraft was, if you can make it, if you can get it to levitate, in other words, you can get it to neutral buoyancy, the hovercraft. He says you can move it with your finger. He says you can move this huge machine as big as a tank with your finger, and that makes a lot of sense. So the Avro car was not any sort of leap forward. It wasn't any sort of it was something that was a dead end. Although Epp said about it, he said I could stabilize it. Is what he said. He says I built this. He tried to get a patent, a German patent, on the steering device for one flying disc, and he basically said in a letter form, I could make this thing look a lot better if you would let me give it a whirl. But of course nobody was going to let him give it a whirl, and well, the Soviets let him give it a whirl. He actually worked for the Soviets after the Second World War, but then he came back to the West. But aside, that Avro car was going nowhere, and maybe designed to do just as you say it was.
Well, I often thought that because it just seemed like to get all the way to the point that they did, that they would have realized well before they brought the brought the thing out for its ill-fated test run, that they would have known that it didn't have sufficient power to do anywhere near what they were talking about. One of the things that brought a lot of the history of World War II and Nazi technology and the legacy of that Nazi technology back to the fore was the story of red mercury that came out in the 1990s and the possible use thereof in having a fusion reaction without the need for a fission bomb, and for boosting output of nuclear devices. And this is something that you looked into as well. Would you care to tell us a little bit about what red mercury is and what
sure.
you discovered in your research about it?
Red mercury is an amalgam of antimony and I think I can say the word and anyway, it's another metal with mercury with some other metals. In my second book, I've got there are various types of red mercury, and I've got some formulas for red mercury, for those chemists that are interested. But basically, what you do with any first of all, any compound of mercury is a solid. So right away, there's, how can you have this red mercury that gets its name because it's a red viscous fluid? So how can this be if all compounds are solids? Well, you mix this stuff up, it turns solid, and the legend of red mercury is you put it then into a reactor, and it absorbs neutrons. And as it absorbs neutrons, it becomes this red viscous material. You get this red viscous material back out of the reactor, and it's stable. It's not radioactive or anything like that. But when you heat it chemically, in other words, when you burn it, it releases the neutrons all at once, and then it's like a neutron bomb. So now Bill Line, that I mentioned before, wrote about red mercury from 1985, long before before anybody really took off on red mercury as something that's real. In the Bell research, Igor Witkowski reported that a very similar type of material was put in the core of the Bell, and then basically turned to plasma. It's turned to plasma by, I believe, by just giving it a huge shot of electricity between the anode and the cathode. It's turned into a plasma, and then it spins automatically if the anode and cathode are magnetic. So and then we go off into what is the Bell? What was the Bell used for? And of course, this application of the Bell, you would think, is either being used to transmute something else, in other words, using the neutrons as neutron bombardment, or as some sort of a weapon. But basically, Igor Witkowski revived red mercury. Not that it had died from Bill Line, but kind of amplified red mercury from a one source material. In other words, now we have two writers talking about the same thing, and that gives it a lot of credibility. And then we bring in Dr. Joseph Cohen, Dr. Samuel Cohen, the father of the neutron bomb, and he says, "Oh yeah, red mercury is real. It is just Ted, just as you described it. It's a way to get a fusion reaction without first having a fission reaction. It's a way to just chemically, boom, go right to a hydrogen bomb, right to a thermonuclear reaction, if that's what you want." So, by the way, red mercury burns very hot in itself, and the South Africans were always rumored to have made anti-tank weapons with it. So, there's that. So red mercury is a thing that's been under the radar for a long time. The Soviets say that they invented it in 1968. But of course, if Igor Witkowski and the Bell are true, then the Germans had it in 1944. So that's obviously not true. So you have to kind of look for a German origin for red mercury. And the fact that the United States, at the end of the Cold War, they had no idea what red mercury was. The Soviets only knew about red mercury. And that's another indication that it came from the Germans.
From scientists or technology or whatever that happened to go over to the Soviet side after World War II was over. Is that what you're saying? Is that the basis of what you're saying?
What I'm saying is that the way this was apportioned up, and I'm saying it's apportioned up by the Third Power, by the surviving SS, by Hans Kammer, who survived the war, by Otto Skorzeny and his network in South America, by Reinhard Gehlen, who ran the German spy agency comparable to the CIA. That their partnership, their interaction, produced a force that was able to market, to sell this type of technology, so things like red mercury, to both sides, and to play both sides against each other in many cases, and to make gains, to further the interests, what they considered the interests of Germany and they considered the interests of the SS. So Red mercury was something that the Soviets got and the Americans never got, but in its place, you can bet that the Americans got something. So, because the third power was all about a balance of power between the East and West.
Yes, and that the third power you talk about in your latest book, Dark Star, and that is referred to as the Dritte Macht.
Dritte Macht, yes.
Yes, and you talk about secret bases that were still in effect, German secret bases that were operating, presumably after World War II was over, in Norway, Greenland, the Antarctica and South America, probably even other places as well. And would it be your contention, Henry, that the third power, as it's called, would have necessarily held on to some of the best technology for themselves rather than handing it over to either of the Allies after World War II was over?
Well, yes, one of the things they held on to was field propulsion UFOs. And that's the mark. When you have a field propulsion UFO, you have the mark of the third power. That's their calling card. That's the post-war SS. So that's why these things are so secret. That's why the U.S. government is so petrified of them. How would you like to fight a war, think you won, and then have the very best elements of your former enemy kind of rise up somewhere and kind of devil you at times, kind of work with you at times, and kind of devil you at times, and they are so technically superior to you that you're always beholden to them in some way. And that's the position of the third power. The secret bases, there were a lot of secret bases after the Second World War. I go into the kind of the better known bases. There were, you talk about Norway. There's a whole plateau in Norway, in central Norway, that the Germans had colonized and had built bases there. And if you think about a plateau in central Norway, that gives them a boost to launching weapons against Great Britain, and it was strategically just a tremendous asset for them. In northern Norway, they had bases, and these northern Norway bases supplied bases in eastern Greenland and perhaps even southern Greenland. In addition to that, the Germans had, this is a little known fact, but this is an undisputed fact, the Germans had bases all through the Arctic. They had bases in the Soviet Union. They had bases in Canada. They had at least one base in Canada. They had bases in Greenland. These were weather stations. So the Germans really had a lot of bases in the north. The Germans had bases in Neuschwabenland, the area they carved out for themselves in 1938 and 1939. They had extensive bases there. They had bases in South America, especially, and they had tracts of land that they purchased during the war, and then were able to use as the Germans had word Sperrgebiet, like a secured zone. They have their own countries in essence in South America. They could bribe the politicians, and they had their own little armies in these safe zones where they could set up scientists. They could set up labs. They could. A lot of these bases were underground. One of these bases was where Dr. Ronald Richter worked on an island on the border between Argentina and Chile, where he worked on fusion energy. So, that base wasn't even secret. I've seen pictures of that base myself. So that base is certainly in existence. There's a base at Fuerteventura, which Fuerteventura is the easternmost Canary Island. And if you've ever seen Raiders of the Lost Ark, the first story where they're aboard a submarine, and a Nazi submarine, and they go into a tunnel, and there's this base where the Holy Grail is kept, and there's a turntable in this tremendous facility. Well, that's real. That's Fuerteventura. There were 3 tunnels. This base has been found after, it's always been rumored to exist. It's been found after the Second World War and explored by at least one, maybe two parties have gone down there and explored it. The base is sealed off now. They sealed off two tunnels immediately after the war, and these people got in the third tunnel. And they found the turntable. They found two submarines down there that were lying derelict down there from World War II times. They found maps of South America, the South American coast, where these submarines, after the war had ended, were used to transport Nazis and blueprints and money and whatever they wanted to South America. And they also found in one of these submarines, because they gained entrance to one of these submarines, they found evidence that the CIA was in compliance with this. So, we have a fascinating tale of, on the one hand, on the surface, you would think these people are all against each other, and then, you go a little bit below the surface and you find that these people know about each other, and you go a little bit further down and you find that sometimes these people work together, and that's the basic pattern of the third power in both East and West.
Well, you mentioned Antarctica as well, and of course there's the story of Operation High Jump that came after World War II. And does this figure into the fact that the Nazis were still active in Antarctica at that time? What's your take on that particular scenario?
Well, I think it's all true. I think Admiral Byrd in 1946 somehow realized that, hey, we've got bases in Greenland. By the way, there was a base called by the Poles Beaver Dam. This was a base that's actually farther north than the base in Antarctica is south. So this was at the very tip of Greenland, and this was built there by the Germans during the war. And the significance of this base was that there was essentially a coal mine underneath it, and they could use the coal for power. So in Neuschwabenland, they had geothermal power. So you have to look for a power source for some of these big facilities, and those were the two power sources. But Admiral Byrd, if you recall, made the statement that in the next war, we're going to have to watch out for saucers that can fly from pole to pole. I have the exact quote in my newest book, Dark Star. So Byrd somehow was aware of probably both bases, and they went to South America in 1946 with, the cover story was, we're going to go down there and do some sort of research for Antarctic research, and they needed 3 fleets. They needed 4,000. They had 4,000 soldiers. They had submarines, helicopters, cruisers, aircraft carriers. You don't take all these things down to Antarctica to do scientific research. So they land, they fan out. They land on the opposite side from Neuschwabenland. And then they send out air sorties over, in trying to get closer and closer to it, kind of probing it. And then they lose a bunch of airplanes, and they don't know why, but the 6-month expedition ends in 6 weeks. They pack up and go home. So those are the facts behind Operation High Jump, and what happened. What happened as far as the Americans are concerned. And then Byrd makes this strange statement about pole to pole, flights coming from pole to pole, and how we have to watch out, and rather bizarre statement for a Navy admiral, and then comes the National Geophysical Year, 1957-58, and we take what is our experimental Polaris missiles by ship within range of Neuschwabenland, and then detonate nuclear explosions over Neuschwabenland. And according to the Germans, they had absolutely no effect. Of course, they were trying for an electromagnetic pulse to knock out the electronics. And no, it didn't work. The Germans say, no, we had already thought of that, and we had shielded our equipment from that. And the Germans, the Wilhelm Landig, the SS man who has written about this, says, we left Antarctica in 1960, and we left it because people who had been down there for so long, from in the mid 1940s to the 1960s, had lost all immunity to disease. Antarctica is a very germ-free place. There are just not a lot of bacteria around, so the body gradually loses its immunity to bacteria and viruses. Normal humans come into contact with other humans every day, and they're absorbing these bacteria, and their immune systems are challenged constantly, and they're kind of strong because of that. Well, that wasn't happening in Neuschwabenland, and so any visitor coming there would set off an epidemic. I mean, would set off any cold, any little sniffle was a pandemic for them, and so they realized, hey, look, we're at the end of the world anyway. We have bases in South America. Let's just pack up and go to South America. So that's what they did.
Very interesting. Well, of course, that whole episode is rather bizarre in any case because Byrd, after Operation High Jump, of course, was very reticent to talk about anything having to do with the expedition. And, of course, there are the consistent stories of Germans being in attendance down there, and the scenario that you've laid out as far as attempts to try to root out the German presence in Antarctica are very interesting. One aspect of that story that I hadn't heard before is the idea of the loss of immunity, and that certainly does paint a different picture there. And of course, it would seem highly likely that if they did move out, they would go to a place where they had established themselves also. And there is a great deal of evidence that the Germans were heavily involved in South America, in addition to other areas around the world. So we'll get into that, and we'll get into what happened to Hans Kammler and some of the other important Nazis that likely survived the war, and where they went and what they did, and get into some other areas of the Third Power, the surviving Nazi force, something akin to the Odessa and the Der Spinne that survived the war, the powers that were put into place to provide support for fleeing Nazis and also to set up financial structures in other places.
Hello all, Jamie Havocan here. Let me tell you something if you have not heard. There is a magazine out there. Many say it is the best ufology magazine in the world, and I highly agree. UFO Mag, if you're not a subscriber, please go there. UFOmag.com is the best ufology magazine in the world. Keep up to date on UFO news, subjects, and everything in ufology with some of the best writers around. For Inception Radio listeners only. Usually it's $19.95 for 5 issues. If you mention Inception Radio, you get 6 issues for $19.95. Go there now. UFOmag.com. Tell them Jamie sent you. I'll see you there. Hey guys, Jamie Havocan here, reminding you to tune into Future Theater Radio, Saturdays, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, as hosts Bill and Nancy Burns bring you the brightest and best guests from around the world to share their vast knowledge with us listeners. That's Future Theater Radio, Saturdays, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, right here on InceptionRadioNetwork.com. Just go there and hit the Listen Live and Chat tab, and you're in business. I'll see you there.
Hi, folks. This is Ray Hobbs.
And this is Royce Fitzgerald.
And we're with Eyewitness Radio. And we wanted to stop by just to remind you that every Thursday night, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern, you can catch us right here on the Inception Radio Network. You know, every Thursday, we bring you the brightest minds, the bravest investigators, the best authors and researchers in the field of ufology, as well as the latest news from the Mutual UFO Network.
And don't forget, Ray, we'll be taking questions in the interactive Listen Live and Chat room, as well as toll-free call-in questions towards the end of the show.
That's right, Royce. So be here to join us every Thursday night from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern for the Eyewitness Radio Show right here on the Inception Radio Network. Hi, folks. Ray Hobbs here for the Inception Radio Network, and I just wanted to stop by to remind you to catch a really great show here on IRN. It's the Inception Radio Show with my good friend Jamie Havocan. Every Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, Jamie brings the biggest names in the paranormal and UFO subject today. Names like Dr. Edgar Mitchell and Stephen Bassett, Stanton Friedman and Jesse Marcel Jr., Patty Greer and Richard Dolan, just to name a few. It's every Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. It's live and worldwide. It's the Inception Radio Show with Jamie Havocan right here on the Inception Radio Network.
Carl Sagan once wrote that the questioning mind needs to be instilled with both skepticism and wonder, for the universe is a pretty big place, filled with undelved mysteries, sciences, and life that we've barely begun to comprehend. Every month, Intrepid Magazine brings you both the wondrous and the skeptical. Intrepid Magazine focuses on science, metaphysics, UFOs, politics, conspiracies, and unexplained phenomenon, all offered up by Intrepid's cadre of writers and contributors, comprised of a host of seasoned authors, pundits, and recognized names in their fields. The universe is indeed a big place, and where other magazines leave off, Intrepid Mag is just beginning. Subscribe to Intrepid Magazine today at www.intrepidmag.com. That's www.intrepidmag.com.
Breathing long between the walls in a bleeding human furrow. Get down, man. Don't raise your head. You might lose sight of tomorrow.
Hello and welcome back, everybody, to the Stench of Truth radio show. I'm here every Friday from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time on InceptionRadioNetwork.com. I'm your host, Ted Torbich, and today I have as my guest Henry Stevens, the author of 3 books on Nazi secret and suppressed and hidden technology. The first one is Hitler's Flying Saucers, a guide to German flying discs of the Second World War. The second, Hitler's suppressed and still secret weapons, science and technology, in his latest book, Dark Star. And right before the break, we were talking about German bases that spread throughout the world, into the Arctic, into the Antarctic, South America, the Canary Islands, and some other places that were quite advanced and well-equipped. And we had touched on Operation High Jump and Admiral Byrd, and also atomic bomb explosions very near Neuschwabenland, or Queen Maud land of Antarctica, that the Germans had claimed as their own during their expedition to Antarctica in the 30s, as a way to try to counter the third power, which in German is the Dritte Macht, and So we'll bring Henry back on. And Henry, I wanted to ask you, as I noted before we went to break, that Kamler, as you noted earlier, it's your belief that Kamler survived the war, and it's probably no stretch to say that Kamler and his work with the Bell and other secret work that he was doing for the SS probably all absconded with him. What is your what has your research revealed about where Kamler went and where the Bell went, and to what uses this technology was put after the war?
Well, I think we have to set up Hans Kamler a little bit before we talk about him too much in detail.
Absolutely.
Kamler was a doctor of engineering, and he was originally a nobody. He was a doctor of engineering that specialized in underground facilities. So he was charged with building underground facilities. Everything had to go underground because the Allies were bombing everything, and so the Germans needed somebody that could do this rapidly and do this well. And they turned to Dr. Kamler, and he says, no problem. And he came along, and he just did these things so fast. He built facility after facility after facility in just like under budget, record time. I say that Kamler engineered the engineers to build this. He somehow he got these things done in miraculous order, and he was in the SS, and they began to notice, well, this guy's really a bright guy, and not only can he do underground facilities, but he's a doctor of engineering, and he can understand all the other technologies. So as the SS ascended in power, so did Kamler, and eventually the SS and Kamler were given every secret project, every secret and high priority project in Germany. This is from the middle of 1944 onward, summer of 1944 onward. So Kamler had reign over the Saucer project, for instance. So he came in to see Georg Klein, who was running it for the German Air Force, and he reached Klein. He says, "I'm going to keep you on, but you're going to be working for me." And he says, "So tell me about these three conventional projects. Which one is the best?" Now this conversation was actually set down in writing and recorded in the Hamburg Morning Post, which my friend, fellow researcher Klaus-Peter Rothkugel got and put in his book. So we know about this very conversation. Kamler says, to Klein, which one do you recommend? And he says, well, we have the Mita project. It flies 1,200 miles an hour, vertical takeoff landing. We have the Habermas project, same results. Then he starts going back and forth between the two. And Kamler just says, Klein, hold on. He calls him Klein. He says, Klein, wait a minute. He says, look. He says, we have the Mita project and we have the Habermas project. Basically the same result. The Habermas project is much simpler and costs half as much to build. Build the Habermas project, started in Czechoslovakia in an underground facility he named, and get rid of the Mita project. We don't need it. It's superfluous. And that's the way he operated. That's what he did. And that's what the Germans did. So by the end of the war, they were actually in assembly line production of this Habermas machine. Now, getting back to Kamler himself, he had, like you say, he had the Bell project. He had his own facilities at Skoda. He had taken over the Skoda Works, which is like General Motors in Czechoslovakia and Prague. They had many hundreds of subcontractors. It's a huge industrial facility. He just made it his. That was going to be the SS facility. He had rocket launching facilities of his own outside Piedemonte. He had his own rocket scientists. This is something that is not reported. He had 3 atomic projects. He co-opted Kurt Diebner from the mainstream German atomic projects, and he liked Diebner because Diebner actually wanted to build an atomic bomb. The rest of them were kind of lukewarm on the idea. He wanted to do this, so he got Diebner to actually do something. So Kammler rose to the level of maybe, let's see, there was Himmler, there was Gestapo Muller, Heinrich Gestapo Muller. Then there was Kammler. So he was number 3 in the SS at the time the war ended. Now, at the time the war ended, Kammler disappeared, and there's a lot of stories as to what happened to him. And 5 stories all deal with Kammler's death. So Kammler, according to the official records, died, and each one of these stories, if you were to hear the story, I guess in 1945 they sounded reasonable, but today they're laughable. They all just sound like something you would tell a child. In other words, none of the stories were actually believable, but none of the Allies were ever looking for Kammler. Now, this is the number 3 guy in the SS, the guy that's in charge. This is Werner von Braun's boss's boss, Kammler. Nobody's looking for this guy. The Holocaust people are not looking for him. The United States government's not looking for him. The British, the French, the Russians, nobody's looking for him. They all say, "Oh, he's just dead." Well, no, he's not dead. And he didn't commit suicide, and he wasn't, killed in some fictitious gun battle. Records have been found by Edward Mayer and Thomas Manner. These are 2 German researchers. Records in the form of a series of letters from an old German named Hans Rittermann. No, Hans, Rittermann. This is a very German-sounding name, and I'll get back to this, eventually. But Ritter is like rider, okay? But Ritter also means knight, and Mann with 2 N's means man. So this is a very masculine, super German name, Hans Rittermann. Well, Hans Rittermann was a guy in Thuringia, and he was a contractor, and he was really good at building underground facilities. He was one of Kammler's guys. So Rittermann builds 5 huge underground facilities the size of Nordhausen in this Jonas Valley, and the facilities become interconnected. There was actually a Fuhrer bunker. The last Fuhrer bunker was in this facility, codenamed Olga. Well, but there were other facilities. There were research facilities. There were weapons facilities. There was a huge facility there that had enough generators in it to power all of Berlin. So this was a huge underground facility, all done by this Hans Rittermann, basically. Hans Rittermann is captured by the Americans at the end of the war. Patton's army comes in, and Hans Rittermann gives up a couple of minor facilities, and the Americans are thinking, "Wow, well, this Rittermann guy, he's a really cool guy," and so the Americans leave because this was going to be a zone of Russian occupation. By the way, Rittermann spoke English. And the Russians come in, and the Russians, so he gives up a couple more to the Russians. Not these major facilities, but just a couple tidbits. And Rittermann also speaks Russian. So the Russians say, "Okay, well, we're going to hire you. We're going to hire you as a consultant." So Rittermann works for the Soviets until 1985, retires, immigrates to the United States, and then began sending letters to the CIA and another intelligence entity, which I'll get to in a minute, about facilities in Germany. And among the facilities in Germany, among this discussion, as he's discussing these facilities, he describes what really became of Hans Kammler. And Kammler, according to Rittermann, survived the war, surrendered to Patton, and Patton realized that Kammler this guy's just way too hot. He's too valuable to put on trial. He's too hot to handle. So he moves him from, and Rittermann describes daily, where like May 7th, every day he describes where Kammler goes and who he meets with and what he's doing. And eventually, the end of the story is that Kammler is set up in Prague, and he's set up as a consultant to both the East and the West. So he's given maybe a facility the size of an apartment house, and he's got a staff, and he's got people, and he's just too valuable. We got to, we can't touch this guy. We're going to have to. Both sides are kind of courting this guy. And Ritterman says that he saw Kamler after the war, and again in 1964 in Prague, in his new abode. Ritterman then, as I say, this man with this hyper-German name. The other set of intelligence documents he sent to the Mossad, he sent to Israel, because as it turns out, Hans Ritterman's real name was Hans David Hoffman, and he was a Jew. And this was no secret from the Nazis. This was stated on his ID card. So this is a Jew who worked with the Nazis in a very high profile and a very high security way. And so when he says that Kamler survived the war and gives hour by hour details, and I translated all this and put it in Dark Star. This has a tremendous amount of credibility with it that comes with Ritterman and his testimony. And anyone who's ever dealt it, this was one part of a letter, but Ritterman sent many letters as he got into his 90s, and then eventually died in Israel under this other name. So that's how we know about the final outcome of Kamler. And of course, if you can imagine, Kamler's not existing in a vacuum there in Prague. I mean, he's got to have, like the Red Mercury thing, to get Red Mercury, to get the formula, to get that information for the Soviets, he's got to go in. Oh, by the way, Kamler had a lot of stashes of microfilm that even Ritterman says have not been found today. So Kamler would have to send out a courier to get specific pieces of information that he's going to sell or trade to either the East or West. To do this, Kamler needs the intelligence services of Reinhard Gehlen, who was a Nazi, the Nazi spy master that had a network in the Soviet Union during the war, and that the CIA just kind of reactivated. It reactivated Gehlen and his network to spy on the Soviets. Well, Gehlen eventually became the West German intelligence service. He never came to the United States, or if he did, it's only fleetingly. And he was actually set up in Germany, in I believe Munich. Then we have Otto Skorzeny. You mentioned Martin Bormann. Martin Bormann setting up the financial arrangements for the SS survival groups. Well, after the war, Martin Bormann, he really never resurfaced. So now we can talk about Bormann if you like, but what surfaced was Skorzeny, because Skorzeny was privy to all this information. And after the war, the SS they had made a conscious decision that we are going to hang together, and we are going to be led by our men, our heroes. We're not going to ever listen to the Nazi Party people again. In other words, Bormann, because these people have utterly failed us. So I'm even thinking if Hitler had survived, as charismatic and as powerful as this guy was, he would have been so diminished in the post-war SS that I'm not even sure he would be listened to in the same way. But Skorzeny, I have a chapter on Skorzeny in Dark Star, kind of introducing him to Americans and to English-speaking people. This was, if you could imagine John Wayne, all John Wayne's war movies. If you can imagine a real-life person, that's Otto Skorzeny.
Mm-hmm.
So Skorzeny had the moral authority to tell the SS people what to do, and that's what he did. By the way, he was an engineer and a pilot, also being an SS colonel. Had an engine, wasn't wanted by anybody. Had an engineering firm in Madrid, so he would go back and forth between Madrid and South America. He actually recovered the SS Fortune that Hjalmar Schlacht and Martin Bormann had entrusted to Juan Perón and Vita Perón. He got that back. They didn't want to give it back. He got it back. So he had the people, he had the scientists, he had the blueprints, he had the money, all the Nazi gold. He had recovered all the Nazi cash, all the Nazi connections were under control of Otto Skorzeny in South America. So between Skorzeny, Galen, and Kammler, they're able to negotiate. These are three people that are second fiddle to nobody, intellectually or in terms of courage. So they're able to negotiate with the Allies on a one-to-one basis. As a matter of fact, Skorzeny, after the war, negotiated with Winston Churchill. Churchill, it seems, had written a bunch of letters to Mussolini after the war had started. After the war had started, and during the war, Mussolini and Churchill are corresponding through back channels, written correspondence. Well, we know this because when Mussolini died, Skorzeny got this. There's a long story that goes with this, but the end result is an SS man picks this briefcase up, and it's Churchill's love letters to Mussolini. Essentially, I like to call them love letters. After the war, Skorzeny blackmailed Churchill. Churchill's up for re-election. It's not looking good for him. Skorzeny calls Churchill and says, "Look, I got your letters." And Churchill says, "Well, what are you talking? What letters?" He says, "The letters you wrote to Mussolini during the war." And Churchill says, "Okay, well, we have to have a meeting." They met. There was a meeting, and somehow all the people, most and all the worst of the SS that were being held in British prisons, they were released. So what I'm saying is that Skorzeny, Galen, and Kammler were up to any challenge, any intellectual challenge that were posed by the Allies, and could deal probably above anything like that, and were able to deal with them in terms of what they wanted, when they wanted it, and how things were going to come out, because they really held a lot of cards. So that's kind of Kammler and the SS in a nutshell.
Mm. Well, it's well known to anybody who has studied history that Otto Skorzeny was extremely active after the war, and in fact worked with Odessa and Dishpina, and as you point out, also on the technology side of things as well. So anybody who has done any kind of research into history can even find references to his activities after World War II. So that is something that's not in dispute. I think what you're saying here, especially in regards to Martin Bormann. Personally, I'm convinced that Bormann survived World War II, and you say that he didn't really surface afterwards. So what I'm getting from that is the fact that what we had after the war was over is that we had people who were in positions of authority who actually were getting their jobs done. They were doing what they were supposed to be doing, and they were producing results. But the leadership within the Nazi Party, within the government itself, was not producing for them. In other words, they led to their defeat during World War II, and then after World War II is over, Skorzeny and Kammler and Reinhard Gehlen pretty much were the three main players in the post-war Nazi survival, because they did not they relegated anybody who was in more positions of authority in the government to a lesser role, if any role at all, because they felt that they had been sabotaged by them. Is that pretty much where you're going with that?
Well, yeah, they had been ineffective. I should mention that Joseph Farrell agrees with you and believes that Martin Bormann had a part in this somehow, but I just don't see any evidence in that. And I know through researching the post-war SS that they felt that the political people, the political wing of the SS, the Himmler types, they weren't up to speed. They were not they had lost all standing with the SS themselves, and the SS leaders after the war were the heroes of the war, people that had proved themselves to have abilities during the war. Now, I'm not sure that was confined to the SS. There was a flyer, I can't think of his name right now, wrote a book called Trotzdem, that's a hell of a title in German. I can't think of his name now, but I must be getting senile. But anyway, he was in the Air Force, and he was actually one of Hitler's picks to succeed him. Hans Ulrich Rudel was his name, and I'm kind of thinking that somebody like that would have been taken up in this movement without question, also, and naval people. It would have been the same way. The second Fuhrer was Karl Donitz. So after Hitler died, Donitz took over. It wasn't a political person. Donitz was an admiral in the Navy. I mean, he was essentially head of the U-boat force, and he was not a political person. So there had been a shift, and even during the war, away from people that talk the talk to people that walk the walk.
Well, I'm not married to the idea that Bormann was essentially involved. The only thing that I'm pretty well convinced of is that he didn't die in Berlin at the end of the war. I'm convinced that he did live, and I would not be averse to the idea that he had just shuffled off to Buffalo, as it were, afterwards, because the people who were running the show after World War II was over simply did not want to be bothered with him. And he may have just went to ground somewhere and lived his life, relative obscurity. I don't really have a problem with that, mainly by virtue of the fact that there's, as you say, very little evidence of Bormann in activity after World War II. So, you'd think that in some places, if he was playing any kind of role at all, there would be some scent of him, and there really isn't all that much to go around. So, I just want to be clear on that. I don't necessarily believe that Bormann was a main player in any of this. I just have a very strong feeling that he survived the war, just like Kammler did. The other issue when it comes to Kammler, of course, is the bell itself and the technology that the bell represented. And, of course, there is several different theories as far as what the bell was and what it was that they were trying to accomplish with this. There's the idea that it's a weapon. There's the idea that it is a propulsion device. There's the idea that you're dealing with some kind of space-time distortion device that could possibly do anything from something as exotic as time travel to accessing other dimensions, etc. Is it possible that what we're talking about here is something that could be used for a multiple number of applications, and that this is an example of technology that is strictly controlled by the third power?
Yes, on both counts. Many of the German inventors would build demonstration devices. They would build devices that could be used for several different purposes. For instance, Hans Kohler, the inventor of a free energy system, he built a demonstration device that would put out 13 volts of energy indefinitely. But it was a demonstration device. His device that he would build, and he was also at the later end of the war sponsored by the German Navy. It was going to put out 6 kilovolts. It wasn't going to put out 13 volts. It was going to put out 6 kilovolts. It didn't work exactly like the demonstration device. Karl Schappeler, who was active in Tesla technology since the 20s, built a device that he tried to market in the interwar years between World War I and World War II that would do a bunch of things. It had electromagnetic force that would push objects. It could be used to steer a boat. It could also generate electricity. It could power the boat. It was just pretty unreliable, and it never got picked up. But it was a demonstration device. So the bell, if you look at the bell and you analyze what it was and how in Dark Star I try to trace the evolution of this technology from Tesla through Carl Chapeller to the Vril Society to the bell, and it's basically it's a plasma vortex, and the plasma vortex has a huge magnetic field that comes with it. And when you have two such magnetic fields, in other words, when you have two or more magnetic fields that are interacting, according to astrophysicist Dr. Paul Potter, what you have is the production, just in the magnetic lines of force joining and separating. That physical action generates electrons and positrons. And electrons go one way, and they go down towards the Earth, and the positrons go away from the Earth. Now, if you study Paul Byfield and the Byfield-Brown effect is what it's called in physics, and this is where you charge a capacitor up with 100,000 volts of electricity. You have to get a pretty strong capacitor, but it will start moving. The capacitor will start moving towards the negative side of the capacitor, and it just moves on its own. This is a type of field propulsion. Well, when you're generating positrons and electrons, you haven't got a charged surface. You've got actual charge. You actually have positive and negative particles. Positrons are positive, electrons are antimatter. So you get a super Byfield-Brown effect out of this thing. So if you had, I have to go back to the structure of the bell. The bell is a plasma vortex, and around it are counter-rotating discs or drums filled with mercury. Now, if you have a conductor moving in a magnetic field, that conductor also electricity is being generated in that conductor. If electricity is being generated in that conductor and it's moving electricity, then you have a magnetic field. It has its own magnetic field. So with the bell, you have three interacting magnetic fields, all generating and interacting. It's such close proximity that they're all generating positrons and electrons. Now that's the basic structure of the bell. Now what it can be used for is, that's the question, and you've hit upon some of the things it can be used for. Evidently, now of course our source in this, we only have a single source really, and that's Igor Rutkowski. Igor Rutkowski saw some Soviet intelligence files at the end of the war that were generated by Schmerz at the end of the war. He got a peek into those through some Polish sources. Now Igor Rutkowski is, I have to back up and talk about him a little bit. He is. I want to say he's the head, but I'm not sure he's the head. But he's a part of a huge conglomerate of research people in Poland and Czechoslovakia that research German World War II facilities. So these guys open up underground facilities that were built by Hans Kammler, and they go explore them layer by layer. In other words, some of these things are 7 layers deep. There's one in Poland called Der Riese, which is just a monster. Der Riese means the giant. And several of these layers, several of these levels are underwater. So Witkowski's group got scuba gear, if you can believe this, and they submerged themselves and went several layers underground in the dark in this cold water. exploring these underground facilities. This is a hell of an achievement. I mean, my hat's off to these people. So what I'm saying is Igor Witkowski is a very respected researcher. So when he says he saw the smirched material and describes the bell and describes where it was and describes these details, but doesn't take it to, any further than the facts he gathers. This is the way it should be done, and this is the way it's done, and this is the way Igor Witkowski did it, and this is why we're talking about the bell today. So Igor Witkowski gives us this description of the bell with the plasma center, with the with possibly something in it resembling red mercury at times, the interacting magnetic fields, and says this might. Now his take on it was it might be used for levitation purposes. Well, hell yes, it was used for. I mean, if you take the red mercury out and just put regular mercury in, you have a levitation device, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind. But the question is, what else could this bell be used for? What else could this? What was this being used for? If it was being tested in 1944, Hitler had a rule: if it couldn't be put into production in a year and it wasn't a weapon, we're not working on it. So, you have to think this had to have some sort of weapons application. Now, the history of the bell is that it originated with a project called Project Thor, Thor. Thor in German is pronounced Tor, like Tor. They don't pronounce the H. Tor in German means door or gateway. So you have to think that maybe, and all German code words have this double entente. So you have to think maybe this Project Thor was a gateway project to something, and it might have branched out. Project Thor itself is said to have had to do with thorium, and the Germans had stockpiled huge amounts of thorium, which is, one isotope of thorium is radioactive, and you have to wonder what in the world they were doing with thorium. Well, Dr. Walter Gerlach, who figures prominently, a German physicist, came up with a way to convert thorium into uranium-233, and the legend says there was another process, something called the photochemical process, with an intermediate stage by which uranium-233 could be converted into uranium-235, which is that's the one that you make a bomb out of. That's the good one. That's the aim. Would be the aim of that project. So the bell may have been involved in production of uranium. Now, you can imagine, you can build these bells pretty big. You know how long it takes to refine. I mean, we're following events in Iran with their centrifuges and how much uranium they have and how much they could have. And well, with a bell type device, you could be making a lot more uranium, if this were true, than you can with the centrifuge devices. So there's a very good possibility, and given Hitler's edict that this has to be weapon related, you have to think that at least one of these goals of the bell had to be to produce fissionable material. Now, if we go back to Project Thor itself, it seems to have branched out into two other. Now, the bell seems to have moved as it was under development. Like all things in Germany at this time, you would come under a sphere of Allied attack and have to be moved. So the bell was always moving. Excuse me. The Project Thor seems to have branched out into Project Lanternenträger, which means light bearer, like lantern bearer. Träger means bearer. And that's obviously some sort of reference to radiant energy. Now, that may be the anti-gravity type. I hate to use the word anti-gravity, but that may be have something to do with that. It also branched out into something called Project Chronos. And Chronos is, I mean, we think, well, that has to do with something with time. I mean, the Chronos, chronology, you would think that indication is pretty clear. But again, nothing is ever clear in German code words. So it seems that Chronos also means Saturn, the word Saturn, as in the planet Saturn. And the interesting thing is here is that the German physicists always kind of considered themselves to be alchemists. They were always looking for, just as transforming thorium into uranium, they're always looking to do the transmutation trick. They love the idea of transmutation on all levels. On the biological level, we have man and we have Superman. And Superman is a transformed, transmuted human. So Nazi ideology is great on this idea of transmutation. So Saturn, in alchemical terms, I have to make a little jump here. The alchemical symbol for the black sun, which is that's transmutation in the alchemy world, is a black Saturn. So if you make the standard symbol of Saturn with the rings going around it, if you make that black, in the alchemical world, that means black sun. Black sun is Schwarze Sonne in German, and that is the esoteric meaning behind the word SS, as in Schutzstaffeln, which is that's for ordinary consumption, but the people that know, the insiders, know it as Schwarze Sonne. So here we have a transmutation symbol worked into the word Chronos, which we all assume means something like time. Now, in my second book, I have a testimony of a German scientist that said, yes, the Germans did experiments in time in Germany. So that certainly is possible. It certainly is possible when you think about Einstein and his special relativity theory. And basically what Einstein says is time and space are one, and heavy objects, objects that have a lot of matter in them in space, also have a lot of gravity to them, and they can actually bend space-time into a gravity well. Well, one of Witkowski's ideas about the bell is that ring, those two counter-rotating rings filled with mercury. He says that you might be able to align those mercury atoms all the same way. And then you would have an electromagnetic force, a tremendous electromagnetic force, which would still be in operation. And you would have these aligned mercury atoms that somehow that I don't understand, would generate actual gravity. So you would now not only you would have a force that's circumventing gravity in the positron electron production. This surfs right over gravity. It makes it just like it didn't exist. But you would have a device that actually generates gravity. Now, if you have a device that generates gravity, you have a device, according to Einstein, that would also influence time. So you do have some sort of a time machine on some level. So far, that's what I've gotten out of the bell.
So I guess what this all boils down to for us today, and particularly in relation to your latest book, Dark Star, is, I guess, it brings us to the question of now. What are we looking at today? Now, we see that there is a very strong indication that there was a surviving Nazi group after World War II, and that these people had access to some of the best technology that the Germans produced during World War II and prior to that. And that in some cases they worked with East and West during the Cold War in order to keep up both sides so that they could play them against each other and hopefully allow for this third power, and that would be the surviving Nazi or SS secret surviving group after World War II to go on about its business without being bothered too much. And sometimes they worked by themselves and kept the technology for themselves. And you have indicated that the Nazis did, in fact, inhabit Antarctica for a period of time, but that proved to be untenable because of the fact that when people live within a virtually germ-free environment for a period of time, they tend to lose their immunity to rather common diseases. So that was not going to be viable for a long time, because any sort of even relatively minor disease that would come in there would be devastating to that community. So you indicated that they abandoned Antarctica and moved to South America. So I guess what I want to ask you is, where do we stand today, Henry? Is this third power still an extremely potent and powerful force in world affairs today, as I believe it is? And is their main base of operation out of South America, or are they making inroads into Europe, say? And the idea of a united Europe having some of these people in key positions may be a revival of the Reich once again.
Well, my opinion is that there were a lot of German corporations that were beholden to the SS after the war, because the SS had loaned them money, had started them up after the war. I don't want to name any names, but there are echoes of this third power certainly today in finance and industry. Now, the people, Otto Skorzeny died 1975. Hans Kammer is said to have died in 1974. Reinhard Gehlen, I think, died in 1979. So a new generation would have come to power within this post-war, within the third power. And eventually we're going to get to people, and maybe since then another generation has come to power. But eventually we're going to get to people that were not involved in the Second World War and are, for all intents and purposes, legitimate people, just as the mafia tried to divest itself of criminal activity and move into legitimate business. So would the people who would be running the third power if it exists today. Now, my feeling that I stated in the book Dark Star is that there was a deal made during the Reagan administration, and I don't want to go into it unless you want me to go into it, but whereby the Reagan people and the SS said, look, we're just not going to conflict anymore. It's just going to be a live and let live world, and the war for us is going to be, we're just going to consider the war over. And I think the Reagan people went along with that. I think the third power went along with that idea, and what we have then are people that don't need flying saucers to fly from here to from Los Angeles to Madrid. They can go on. They can fly first class. They don't need the free energy U-boats that I talk about in Dark Star. They don't need exotic. They're one of us. These people are. They know they have a debt that they owe to this particular group, and these people in industry know that, and the people in finance may know that, but yet these are people that are functioning with us today, and that we probably know and probably have shaken their hands and interacted with them in some way, if not directly. Certainly our leaders have. So I believe they've become integrated into the world, and with Reagan and with the SS kind of saying no mas, that left the door open, and the Soviet Union just kind of fell apart. And I think that's an unintended result of the Reagan and the SS deal. I think it allowed the Soviet Union to kind of fall apart. And now we have a treaty. We have we don't have reunification of Germany. We have unification. Germans always want to make that point. We have a unification of Germany. We have a new world. We have the Second World War is over, and it's over in writing. And that was always one of the SS, the post-war SS, whether what do you call it, the Spina or the Odessa or Bruderschaft or whatever name you want to call it. Their goals were to the downfall of the Soviet Union, the unification, the reunification of Germany, and the kind of the cleaning up of the SS to make it a respectable organization. And according to their goals, they succeeded on 2 of those, and 2 out of 3 isn't bad.
Well, then, and that kind of makes sense. I mean, really, if you think about it, the grudges and everything that would have been fueling a lot of the activity of these people after the war would be greatly lessened by virtue of the fact that new people would be in charge. So what do you think we're going to see as far as the legacy of this technology is going to be? Do you see this being gradually introduced into society through corporations that have been financed and helped along by the third power while it was still in operation and while it was still setting up its network, or do you see that some of this technology is just so advanced that some of these people may feel as though they don't want it ever to get out into the public because of the tremendous potential of it to have a devastating effect, or to have such a transformative effect that it could turn out to be a bad thing for humanity?
Well, I kind of think that's a mixed bag. By and large, private corporations have not produced this technology. They have not come forth. The big exception is the transistor. I'm convinced that the Germans invented the transistor, and it was taken by the Americans. I don't think that this was sold. I don't think this was a sold technology. I think this was they just came in and took it at a specific lab in Germany, the OFF lab in Germany, and that it was given then to the people that say they invented it at GE, and it came out as a GE invention, and it wasn't, and somebody made some money on it. And maybe there were other aspects of the computer technology, like magnetic tape storage. I mean, there are things that possibly have leaked out, such as that. But most of what the third power did was, I feel, direct transfer to government. And that stuff, I mean, we wouldn't know about red mercury if the Soviet Union hadn't collapsed. We would still not know about it today. There are things that governments can't keep secret, in spite of what everyone says. In my second book, I talk about a type of total reaction rocket engine that I really think the Germans designed, but that the Russians built. And this total reaction engine, the Russians just decided, we're not going to make these anymore. We're not going to make any more. We're just going to put them in storage. And then they decided, we're just going to destroy them all. Excuse me. And if it hadn't been for a few Russian scientists just taking a few examples of this total reaction engine aside, we wouldn't know about it today, because our intelligence never found out about it. And the surviving Soviet scientists made a deal with NASA, and now the Delta 4 or Delta 3 or those rockets all use this engine. It's a very efficient engine. We use a Soviet-designed engine in our latest rockets, and it's this total react. So government secrets can be kept. UFOs is another great example. But I think a lot of this technology, most of this technology, went government, from the third power to the governments, never saw the light of day. There's no reason that our government's ever going to let it see the light of day. As far as we're concerned, they're not going to give it to private industry unless it's to their advantage. And why would it be? Why would it be?
That's a very good question. Obviously, if it gives them an advantage to keep this stuff secret, it's going to remain secret. And I guess we can just live another day to imagine the day whenever we have access to energy generation devices that are incredibly more efficient than what we have today, and also incredibly fast and efficient means of transportation and all these other things that would make life easier for us. But also presumably, be a detriment to people in positions of power. And of course, I completely agree with you, Henry. The governments are very good at keeping secrets, and every time I hear skeptics talk about the fact that there's just too many people going to be involved with any one of these things to keep it a secret, and someone's going to talk, and it's not going to be able to be kept. It just makes me laugh inside because I know of so many examples where secrets have been kept successfully for a long period of time. And considering the fact that a lot of the material that we talked about today, the types of technology and things that you have outlined in your books, are things that a lot of people, skeptics, if you want to use that term, would deny even exist in any form or shape whatsoever. So, in effect, there wouldn't be anybody looking for this material or wondering why it hasn't surfaced, because they would just deny that there is anything there to find. Today, my guest has been Henry Stevens, the author of 3 books. He's working on a 4th book right now, which will go into a little bit more detail, both on the physics side and on the historical side. And Henry has written 3 books already. 2 of them are available from Adventures Unlimited Press. The other one you can find on Amazon.com. And the one on Amazon is Hitler's Flying Saucers, A Guide to German Flying Discs of the Second World War. The other 2 books that can be found at Adventures Unlimited Press are Dark Star, and with the subtitle, The Hidden History of German Secret Bases, Flying Discs, and U-Boats. There's certainly a lot of information there. And the other book is Hitler's Suppressed and Still Secret Weapons, Science, and Technology. Thank you for joining us today, Henry. I think we could probably do a couple more shows on the subject of Nazi secret technology, so I'd love to have you on in the future when we can talk about this some more.
Well, it's been a pleasure, Ted, and I certainly, if you want me back, I'll come back and we'll talk again. But it certainly has been a pleasure to be on your show.
Thank you very much again, Henry Stevens. Everybody, if you're interested in this subject, please don't hesitate to buy his books and get into reading about this, because it's a very fascinating study and it's very interesting, not only for historical purposes but for our future. So join me again next week, 7 to 9 p.m. Actually, no, I won't be here next week. I'll be at Mothman Fest next week. So I'll be back in 2 weeks with a live show with Mark Gaffney to talk about Black 9/11. And stay tuned now for
Moving forward back to you. they grew.